Hey guys, in this video I'm going to demonstrate the Eclipse Photoshop action. So the way this action works is that you start off with your photo, you fill in your subject with a color, and you run the action, and with this action it creates all these effects for you. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see more of the details. So the action comes with three different options. You can choose thin lines, medium lines, or thick lines. Okay. And it also creates, this border, this background pattern, basically everything you see there. Alright, so I'm jumping into Photoshop now and start off with my photo. So there's just a few things you need to check off just to make sure your file is set up correctly and you don't run into any problems. So firstly, go into your layer panel and click on this top right hand corner icon. Okay, I'm just going to detach this panel for a second. So click on this, go down to panel options, make sure add copy to copied layers and groups is ticked, click OK. Let's drag this back here. Next go to select color range and just make sure that sampled colors is the one that is selected before we run the action. Okay, so if any one of these other things are selected, just turn it back to sampled colors. Next go to image mode, make sure you're in RGB color mode and 8 bits channel is selected. Still in image, go down to image size. As always, make sure you're working with high resolution photos. Good range for this action is anywhere from say 1500 all up to 4500 pixels. Okay, I'll cancel that. So now what I need to do is load up the brushes that were included in the download. So if I just hit B, that'll activate the brush tool. Now if I right click anywhere over my image, it'll bring up the brush panel. So what I need to do here is replace all these brushes with the ones in the download. So you click on this icon here, you go to replace brushes and just navigate to the eclipse_brushes.avr file that was in the download, and we'll replace all the brushes with these ones. Alright, so just click away. So the next step is that I need to fill in my subject with a color. So we need to create a new layer. So go to Layer, New Layer. This must be called Brush, all in lowercase letters. Okay. So with the brush layer selected, we need to fill in our subject with a color. So if I just hit W to activate my Magic Wand tool. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure that sample all layers is selected up the top here. I'm just going to start clicking around in this background area and holding down Shift to increase the selection. Just like that. Now I need to invert this selection, so Control Shift I or Command Shift I. And to fill a selection with a foreground color, so I'll just change it to a red. Doesn't matter what color. Just hold down Alt Backspace or Option Backspace. Okay, I'm just going to hit P to grab the pen tool out, and I'm just going to, do a real rough job around here, fill in this area. Okay, that's that. So what I might actually do here is just hit E. That's going to grab the eraser out, the eraser tool, and I'm just going to zoom out and just erase around here. So I just want this effect to sort of fade off a bit down the bottom. Something like that. Okay, that'll do. So I've got my brush layer there. I filled in my subject. So now I need to load up the actions panel. Excuse me. So go to Window, Actions. It'll pop up to the side here. Click on this icon. And go to Load Actions. Then navigate to the eclipse.atn file, and it will pop up here. Okay. So these are the three actions that I was talking about earlier. You've got your thin lines, okay, your thin lines here, medium, then thick. So you can just experiment with those on your photos. My favourites are thin lines because you get a lot more detail into your image, but just experiment with those. So everything's done. One thing you should always check before you run the action. So whenever there's brushes that need to be loaded up into the action, just hit B to activate the brush tool and make sure the brush opacity is at 100%. Okay, in the current version of Photoshop, I can't record the changing of brush opacity in the action. Okay, so you just need to check that manually. Alright, so if your brush opacity is really low, you might run into errors, or the effects, some effects will appear really faint, so just make sure that's 100%. Alright, so I'm just going to pick the medium action and click play, and there's just going to be a couple of steps you need to go through after we click play here. So I'm just going to click play, and straight away you'll get a window that says, in the next step, save your Photoshop document. It must be saved as a PSD file. You can name it anything. Click continue below to proceed. So just click continue on this window, and all you need to do here is just save your Photoshop file. So you can see at the moment it's got PNG selected, so just make sure that is a PSD file, okay? And you can call this anything. So I'm just going to call it save, hit enter. Whoops, I've already done this, but I'll just replace that one. Save. Okay, and in a couple seconds you'll get another pop-up window. It says in the next step there will be 2 pop-up windows. Firstly, click OK on the first pop-up window. Secondly, open the file you just saved in the second pop-up window. Click continue below to proceed. So just click continue, and you'll get this displace window here. Okay, so basically all this window is doing, it will distort the lines to wrap around the contours of your subject. Okay, and you can play around with these values here. I don't recommend going anywhere over 5. Basically, this is the amount which those lines will distort. 10's, you know, 10's fairly strong. I usually go for 5 or 10, so you can change them. But just click OK on this window, and then all you need to do is navigate to the file that you just saved. So just double click on, I called it save, so I'll double click on that. And then you get another window. It just says, now repeat the last step. Click continue below to proceed. Click continue. Click OK. And then click on the save file again. And that's it. That's all you need to do. So the action will now run through to the end. It will take anywhere between 1 minute and 2 minutes. That will come down to the size of your photo and the speed of your computer. So I'm just going to fast forward this to the result, and I'll talk to you about what all the layers do. Alright, so the action's all done. I'm going to just collapse this actions panel, and we're going to the layer panel now. So the first thing you want to do, you want to do this with all my actions as well, is when the actions just finish playing back, you want to collapse all the folders that are open. We don't have the ability to record the collapsing of folders in actions, so this is something else you just need to do manually. So just hold down Control, Alt, or Command Option on a Mac, and click on this arrow next to this folder icon. And then reopen the folder, and everything is collapsed. Alright, so everything is in the Eclipse folder here. If I turn this off, you can see the before and after. Okay. Now, if you want to run the action again, say if I wanted to run the action and experiment with the thin lines, all I need to do is delete the Eclipse folder, and I've got my brush layer still there, so I can just run the action again. Alright, so let's go inside the Eclipse folder, and we'll go down from the top here. So this first layer, overall sharpening, I'm just going to zoom in here. Overall sharpening, if you turn this on and off, you see, you might not be able to see that, but it's just adding a real subtle amount of sharpening. And I've got in brackets here opacity, and whenever I've got a layer where I've got in brackets opacity here, I'm basically reminding you to play around with the layer through its opacity. So currently it's at 30%. If I crank that to 100 and then 0, you can see the sharpening effect there, so you can play around with that. Okay, this layer below, by default it's turned off. It's called Overlay Original Photo Color. So if you just turn this on, what it does, it just, it overlays the original colors of your photo. Alright, and play around with the opacity of this layer as well. If you don't want those colors so saturated, just lower the opacity down. And you can also use the mask to control where you want that color to appear. So if I just select this mask here and hit Control or Command I, that will flip it to black. So basically everything's hidden now. So if I just hit B, use the soft brush that's in the brushes here, and use a white brush, I can start revealing, when I paint onto that mask, I can start revealing some of that colour. Okay, and I'm just going to open up, I'll open up an example, another example here where I've used this technique. So here was another result of the action. That's the before. That's after running the action. Okay. Now on the original overlay, original photo color layer here, I've used that to only brush on the green from his jacket. So if I hold down Shift and click on this mask, it's going to hide that mask for a second, and you can see there's the original colors. But I've brushed white to only reveal where I want that green from his jacket to appear. So use that. Try to be a bit creative with the way you can use that layer. Close that down. But I won't use it for this example. Going on down, this layer here, quick color changer. If you double click on this, you can use this hue slider, and that will quickly change the colors of this background pattern and these dots. Okay. So you can use that. You can color all these things individually, which I'll get around to, but if you want a really quick color change, use this method. And you can also do things like click on colorize here. If you want to apply a color over your entire image, just use that option. Okay, this layer here, subject brightness and contrast. If you double click on this layer, you can play around with these two, the brightness here. Okay, you've also got the contrast. If some areas of your photo are too dark, just lower the contrast back, and it will bring out a lot more detail in the shadows. Alright, I might just lower it a little bit for this design. Alright, so the particle folders here, I'll turn that on and off so you can see what that is. It's all those little dots. So if you go inside here, we've got 3 different particle layers. We've got particles 1, 2, and 3. And above these layers, you've got the color layer. So you can just double click on this box and choose a new color. Okay. If you want more particles, you could select the particles group, hit Control or Command J, which would duplicate the entire group, and then you can sort of go inside here and move these around. Hit Control or Command T, rotate them. Alright. Excuse me. Alright, so photo line art. If I turn this off, you'll still get a little bit of detail here coming through. That's from the sharpening layer at the top here. Okay, so if I turn it off, that'll hide that. Okay, so photo line art, this is where everything is basically done with your photo. So if we go inside here, we've got this color setup. We've got red, yellow, green, and blue. And so I'll go from the top here. Lines 1, if I turn that off, you'll see that that is affecting the highlights. As I go down and turn off lines 2, it starts to work through the midtones and down to the bottom here to the shadows. Okay. So, and above these layers, I've added another color adjustment layer, so you can just turn on the visibility for these, and it will apply a color in that color range in your photo. And you can just double click on these boxes and change them to whatever you want, which is cool. You obviously don't need to use all of them at the one time. You could say I just wanted that one and I wanted more of the red from that background pattern, something like that. I could go for something like that. And don't forget that I put masks on everything so you can control the visibility of that layer. So say I didn't want this red around his nose here, I could just select this mask, hit B to flip, to make black my active color, just hit X. Okay, so now I can brush black into this mask, which will hide those details, just like that. Another thing I forgot to point out, with the particles folder, there is a mask on that as well. So if you run the action and say I've got a bunch of particles over his eyes, I would just brush black into that mask to hide those particles. Okay. We'll go back inside photo line art again. So yeah, lots to experiment with here. So these purple layers, let me just zoom in here. So up the top here, they're all called pattern overlay. and they've got very low opacities. If you check the opacity there, that's 30, 10, 20, 20. So if I just crank this to 100, you'll see that it's overlaid a pattern on top of the highlights. Okay, so you can adjust the opacity of these layers to essentially create a different pattern. What you could also do, if I zoom out, zoom way out here and hit Control or Command T, zoom way out, you can actually adjust the rotation of that layer as well. So rather than just getting vertical lines here, you can adjust that to be horizontal. But just remember that by default they've got very low opacity. So for example, this one here, I can turn this opacity up more, and you can see through this red area, I'll bring it to 0, and as I start to increase the opacity, start to get a different texture come through. Okay, so play around with those. Now radial patterns, sorry, if I turn that off, you'll see that that's that main graphic in the background there. So if you go inside here, the first thing you might want to do is scale up or down this radial pattern. Okay, and the default size of this pattern will depend on the size of your photo. Okay, so this pattern will be placed onto your design at, just check the size, at 1300 pixels. So if the size of your photo was say 4000 pixels, this graphic might be quite small or hidden behind your subject. So just select it, hit Control or Command T, that will enable you to scale it. Okay, so you can scale it up and down. I might scale this up a bit. And this graphic here will be placed at the center point of your subject, the vertical and horizontal centers, and then it will be pushed and aligned to the top edge of your subject. Okay, so that's the default placement of this graphic, but it's very similar to jump this folder and move around. So if you want to change the color, just double click on the pattern color adjustment layer here, and that will change the color. And another thing you might want to do here is duplicate this background pattern. So if I just hold down Shift and click on these two layers here, then hold down Alt or Option and click and drag up, that will just make a copy of these two layers. So I can select this one here, Control Command T to scale that, and I can move this down here, and then I've still got this color adjustment layer, and I can play around with the colors there as well. Alright, select those. Now this one here, radial pattern 2, I'm just going to zoom in. So that is this radial pattern in the background here, you see that? You can go inside there. Again, I've just added a color option for it, so you can double click on that and play around with the color of that. The border, pretty self-explanatory. If I turn that on and off, that is the border there. You can go inside here and change the color. Okay. Again, you're not restricted to using all of these elements. If you don't want them, just turn them off. Okay, this one here, background color, you can change the background color easily. And if you want to export, say, just this graphic here of my subject on a transparent background, all you need to do is turn off these bottom 3 layers, turn those off, then everything falls onto a transparent background. So say I don't want the border, I don't want the radial pattern, and I don't want the particles. So now all I'm left with is my photo with all the effects applied, and I can now save that out as a PNG or something with transparency. Okay, and think about how you can use this creatively. Like, you can create a really cool, say, montage graphic. So I can run this action on a few different photos and then export them all on transparent backgrounds, then compile them into one Photoshop file, and place some things behind this guy, and so you can sort of build that up. Okay, and you can apply different colors through different graphics, and yeah, really be creative that way. Alright, let me turn all these back on. Now, just a couple more things. If you wanted, say, to not have a solid background color and you wanted to fall back onto the original photo background, all you need to do is turn off these bottom 2 layers, the background color and this layer here. Turn those 2 off, and it will reveal your original background. Okay, And something you actually might want to play around with is on the Eclipse folder, there is a mask here. So if I grab my black brush and start brushing onto that mask, it's going to hide everything in that Eclipse folder and fall back onto our original photo. So, you know, you can be creative with creating a blend between the Eclipse effects and your original photo. Okay? Let's turn these back on. Whoops, not that one. So there is, I'll just flip to the original. There's the original photo, and there is the Eclipse action. So guys, if you're having troubles with the action, I'll put a link down to my support page below. You can read through that, then contact me via email if you're still stuck. But if not, have a good time using the effect. Thanks.